I lost 30 years believing money responded only to effort, exhaustion, and the willingness to work harder than everyone else. I poured myself into long nights, sacrificed weekends, and convinced myself that discipline alone would eventually unlock the life I wanted. But the truth hit me with the force of a quiet earthquake. The problem was never my effort. The problem was the story I kept repeating about money without realizing that my own words were the chains holding me down. And the secret I spent 3 decades uncovering can be learned in 30 minutes if you listen with your whole spirit. Before we go any further, I want you to do something simple but powerful. Write in the comments a phrase you often say about money. Maybe it's, "I never have enough," or "It always disappears," or "I'm doing what I can." Whatever it is, write it down. Do this because awareness is the first crack in the wall. When you speak a sentence publicly, you pull it out of the shadows and place it into the light, where transformation begins. Your words create the container for your financial life, and until you see them clearly, the container remains sealed. For decades, I didn't understand this. I thought money lived in numbers, in budgets, and spreadsheets. I believed it rewarded intelligence, strategy, or sheer persistence. But Jewish wisdom taught me something radically different. Money responds to identity long before it responds to effort. The way you speak about yourself, the way you narrate your relationship with abundance, the way you position your worth in language, that is what shapes your financial ceiling. Not the market, not the economy, not your job title, your words. I realized this truth slowly, painfully, like waking up from a long sleep. I noticed how often I spoke as if I were behind, as if wealth were always slipping through my fingers, as if life were working against me. And every time I repeated those beliefs, the world rearranged itself to match them. Opportunities I didn't feel worthy of avoided me. Ideas that could have helped me stayed muted. Doors that might have opened remained closed, not because they were locked, but because I never knocked. And then I began studying Jewish financial teachings, expecting tips or strategies. Instead, I found something deeper, a spiritual mechanism hidden inside human speech, a principle that explained not just money, but momentum, confidence, and destiny. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. It exposed the subtle ways people speak themselves into scarcity without ever realizing how costly their sentences are. But the most shocking part was discovering that nearly everyone makes the same mistake. A trap so common, so normal, that it feels harmless, yet it quietly sabotages abundance at its root. And once I reveal this first trap, you will never hear your own words the same way again. There is a principle at the heart of Jewish wisdom that rewired everything I thought I understood about money. Money does not follow effort, it follows identity. This idea, simple yet unnervingly precise, reveals that abundance responds to who you believe you are long before it responds to what you do. And once you see this principle clearly, every financial struggle you've ever faced begins to make sense in a new, almost unsettling way. In Jewish tradition, identity is not a static label. It is an energetic signature shaped by the words you speak about yourself. The sages taught that a person's outer world is a mirror reflecting the inner one, and that speech acts as the bridge between the two. In other words, when you speak, you instruct the universe on how to treat you. When you say, "I always struggle," you become the person who must struggle. When you say, "Money slips away from me," your mind filters out every opportunity that contradicts that belief. Your words become the script, and life becomes the performance. My own family carried this understanding in subtle gestures long before I understood their meaning. I remember my great-uncle, a quiet man who built a stable life from almost nothing. Whenever someone asked him how business was, he never said slow, even on the worst days. He would smile softly and say, "Thank God, I'm expanding." He said it before he believed it. He said it before it was true. He said it until his identity absorbed it. And eventually, reality caught up to his words. At the time, I thought it was optimism.
Now I know it was alignment. This is the hidden Jewish concept. Becoming comes before receiving. The identity you adopt signals what you are ready to hold. A person who speaks like a survivor survives. A person who speaks like a builder builds. A person who speaks like a steward of abundance begins to attract opportunities that match that role. Money is not drawn to desperation. It is drawn to readiness. And readiness is declared through speech. This principle sounds empowering, but it also exposes a painful truth. Most people speak from a place of lack. Their identity is built on phrases they repeat without thinking, small sentences that reinforce small lives. They say, "I can't afford that," not realizing they're reinforcing a ceiling. They say, "People like me don't get ahead," not realizing they're choosing the wrong identity. They say, "I'm doing my best," not noticing the resignation inside the phrase. And hidden beneath these words lies the first trap that keeps people poor in both spirit and finances. A trap so common it feels normal, so familiar it hides in plain sight. A trap that shapes identity long before a person ever earns their first paycheck and limits them long after they've tried everything else. This trap is where the true sabotage begins. And once you see it, you'll understand exactly how your own words have been holding you back. The first trap is so common, so ordinary that most people don't recognize it as a trap at all. It hides inside the small, defeated sentences we speak about money without thinking. Phrases that seem harmless, even honest, yet quietly shape our identity into one that repels prosperity. This trap reveals itself every time someone says, "I'm behind," or "I never catch up," or "money always runs out." And the most dangerous part is that these sentences feel like facts, not choices. But in Jewish wisdom, every sentence is a seed. And when you plant scarcity, you harvest scarcity. I spent years trapped inside this exact pattern. Whenever someone asked how I was doing financially, I responded with a tired laugh and a familiar phrase. "I'm trying, but it's always a struggle." I believed I was describing my situation, but I was actually reinforcing it. Jewish teachings say that speech is not commentary, it is architecture. The words you use become the structure your life is forced to fit inside. And the more I repeated my story of struggle, the more struggle shaped itself around me. The Talmud teaches that the tongue has no bones, yet it breaks worlds or builds them. I didn't understand this until I watched a neighbor of mine live out the consequences of scarcity speech with painful clarity. He was talented, disciplined, and hardworking, the kind of man who should have been thriving. But every time money came up, he would shrug and mutter, "Life is expensive. People like us never get ahead." He said it jokingly, but his eyes never matched the humor. And over the years, I saw this phrase become a prophecy. Opportunities slipped by, raises were denied. He sabotaged chances before they blossomed, not because he lacked skill, but because his identity never permitted abundance. This is the invisible danger of sentences you repeat. If you say, "I'm always behind," your brain filters your choices to keep you behind. It becomes blind to openings, numb to intuition, and resistant to growth. You stop seeing opportunities because your identity doesn't recognize them as belonging to you. And the universe, which responds to readiness, cannot deliver what your own words reject. Scarcity language becomes a self-fulfilling identity. A person who constantly says they are drowning eventually stops trying to swim. A person who insists money is impossible subconsciously avoids paths where abundance might appear. And slowly, year by year, the trap tightens, not through failure, but through repetition. This is why the first step toward abundance is not financial literacy or strategy. It is linguistic correction. You must stop speaking as if life is stacked against you. You must stop narrating a story you no longer want to live. Prosperity begins the moment you refuse to describe yourself as someone destined to struggle. But this first trap is only the foundation. Beneath it lies another danger, subtler, quieter, and far more destructive. a trap that steals momentum at the exact moment success begins to appear. There is a reason Jewish wisdom places such profound emphasis on the nature of speech. Words don't just describe your financial reality, they determine your capacity to receive. The Talmud teaches that a blessing can only rest where there is space. And this space is not physical, but conceptual. It is the shape of your inner vessel, the openness of your identity, the willingness of your mind to hold more than it has held before. And nothing shrinks this vessel faster than scarcity speech. To understand this, imagine your financial life as a cup. Every thought, belief, and sentence becomes the shape of that cup. When you speak in limitation, I can't afford that, money is never enough, I'm just surviving, you tighten the walls of the cup, restricting how much it can hold. The universe cannot pour abundance into a vessel that declares itself full of struggle. Blessings overflow and spill away because the container is too small. Modern psychology mirrors this ancient truth. When you speak scarcity, your brain activates a filter known as the reticular activating system. This filter determines which opportunities you see and which ones you ignore. If your language consistently signals lack, the brain highlights everything that confirms your struggle and blinds you to anything that contradicts it. In other words, the mind shrinks to match the story. And once the mind shrinks, your life follows. I once watched this happen to a man who should have been thriving. He was intelligent, resourceful, and capable of far more than he allowed himself to believe. But every time someone asked about his progress, he answered with the same weary sentence: "It's enough for now." He didn't realize that this quiet acceptance was not humility. It was self-imposed limitation. He spoke as if his cup was already full, and life treated him accordingly. Days became months, months became years, and he remained exactly where he was. Not because he plateaued, but because he declared he no longer needed to rise. This is the power of the vessel. Your language either expands it or seals it shut. And so I ask you softly, where have you been tightening your cup without noticing? In what areas of your life have you been speaking ceilings into existence? Where have you mistaken survival for sufficiency, scarcity for realism, or fatigue for fate? These questions are uncomfortable, but they reveal the places where expansion is waiting for permission. If you listen closely, you may sense that something inside you is ready to grow, ready to shift, ready to hold more. But recognizing this truth is only half the journey. Because even when the vessel expands, another danger waits in the shadows. A second trap that doesn't strike when you're low, but when you finally begin to rise. The second trap is far subtler than the first. Scarcity language keeps you small, but this next mistake steals your momentum right when growth begins. It appears the moment you achieve a small win, a slight increase in income, a promising opportunity, a stroke of good fortune. Instead of strengthening your movement, you relax. You breathe too deeply. You loosen your grip. And without realizing it, you drift into the most deceptive danger on the path to abundance: premature celebration. Jewish wisdom warns against this with remarkable precision. The sages teach that momentum is a spiritual force, delicate and reactive. The moment you soften your intention, momentum softens with you. The moment you pause excessively, momentum dissolves. It does not matter how small the achievement is. If you treat it as completion instead of continuation, you interrupt the flow that was finally beginning to accelerate. This trap hides behind comforting thoughts. I deserve a break. Things are looking good now. I think I figured it out. These sentences feel harmless, even healthy. But they signal to your mind that the pressure is off, that the climb is over, that the identity shift can halt. And the mind, always obedient, responds by lowering its vigilance. It stops generating ideas. It stops seeking openings. It stops pushing toward expansion. The fire that was building quietly cools into embers. I once heard a humorist saying that captured this perfectly. A sleeping crocodile becomes a handbag. It made people laugh, but beneath the humor was a harsh truth. The moment you stop paying attention, the world reshapes itself around your absence. This applies to finances more than anything else. The second you assume success is secure, it becomes vulnerable. The moment you believe growth is automatic, it begins to decay. I saw this in the life of a friend who had fought for years to find financial stability. When he finally landed a decent job and received his first significant raise, he relaxed completely. He stopped learning new skills, stopped networking, stopped planning for improvement. He had convinced himself he was finally set. Within a year, his department closed and he had no momentum left to pivot. What should have been a stepping stone became a trap, not because he got lucky, but because he stopped moving. This trap is dangerous because it disguises itself as peace. It feels like rest, but it functions as retreat. Prosperity is not maintained by intensity, it is maintained by continuity. The difference between the person who keeps rising and the person who falls back is not talent, opportunity, or intelligence. It is steady motion. Even small steps taken consistently sustain the energy that abundance responds to. Yet even this mistake, subtle as it is, pales in comparison to the third trap, a lie so gentle, so comforting that it convinces people to stop growing altogether. And once that lie settles in, prosperity has no doorway left to enter. The third trap is the most dangerous of all, not because it is harsh or frightening, but because it feels peaceful. It disguises itself as maturity, as wisdom, as emotional balance. It is the quiet belief that comfort equals success. This lie is soft enough to soothe you and subtle enough to freeze your life without you even noticing. And once it settles in your identity, it becomes the silent wall that prosperity can no longer climb. In Jewish wisdom, this trap is considered the most spiritually restrictive because it imitates acceptance. True acceptance is active. It acknowledges the present while remaining open to growth. False acceptance, however, is disguised resignation. It's the moment someone says, "I'm okay where I am," not from gratitude, but from fear of stretching. It's the moment someone stops dreaming because dreaming requires courage. It's the moment they confuse safety with fulfillment. I've watched many people fall into this illusion. They are not suffering. They are not failing. They are simply comfortable. And comfort, when misunderstood, becomes the enemy of expansion. These are the people who say, "My life is fine," even when their heart feels small. They say, "This is enough," even when their spirit whispers that there is more. They stop challenging themselves, not because they lack potential, but because they have learned to tolerate the absence of growth. Psychologically, comfort erodes ambition. The brain, when it believes everything is good enough, reduces its search for opportunities. It stops scanning the world for advancement. It stops activating the parts of the mind responsible for vision, strategy, and adaptation. Neuroscientists call this the decline of the future orientation network. But Jewish wisdom said it long before science. Where there is no vision, there is no blessing. I once met a woman who experienced this trap with heartbreaking clarity. She had reached a level of stability she never had before. A steady job, a modest home, a predictable routine. After years of chaos, she finally felt calm. But that calm became her cage. She stopped learning, stopped exploring, stopped asking for more. She told herself she was being grateful, but really she was avoiding expansion. And over time, the life that once felt safe became painfully small. She hadn't failed. She had simply stopped growing. This is why the third trap is so devastating. It convinces you that wanting more is greedy, unnecessary, or unrealistic. It forces you to shrink your desires until your soul no longer fits inside your life. And prosperity cannot enter a place where desire has been shut down. Abundance responds to openness, to movement, to the willingness to pursue growth even when life feels stable. But here is the gift hidden within this trap. The moment you see it, the moment you recognize the difference between comfort and complacency, the spell breaks. And once the spell breaks, you become ready for the shift that took me 30 years to understand. A shift you can master in 30 minutes once you learn the formula that transforms identity into prosperity. It took me 3 decades to understand a truth so simple, so precise, that when it finally revealed itself, I felt both liberated and foolish. I had spent most of my life trying to change my circumstances without changing the identity that created them. I worked harder, pushed longer, learned more, sacrificed endlessly, yet nothing shifted because I was still operating from the same internal role. Jewish wisdom teaches that identity does not follow action. Action follows identity. And the moment identity changes, prosperity moves with it. This is the shift that took me 30 years but will take you 30 minutes. It begins with a formula, 3 movements of the soul, 3 internal alignments, 3 forces that rewire your relationship with money from the inside out. Gratitude, responsibility, expansion. These are not abstract values. They are active ingredients that, when spoken and embodied together, reshape how the world responds to you. The first movement is gratitude. In Jewish tradition, gratitude is not a passive feeling. It is a declaration that you recognize the blessings already in your hands. Gratitude softens the ego. It dissolves fear. It opens the vessel. But gratitude alone is incomplete. When practiced without movement, it becomes comfort, and comfort becomes stagnation. That is why the second movement is essential, responsibility. This is the point of identity where you stop waiting for life to change and begin behaving as someone entrusted with abundance. Responsibility is not burden, it is readiness. When you say, "I am working," you tell the universe you are participating in your own prosperity. You demonstrate that you are not a passive recipient, but an active co-creator. And this shift attracts opportunities that do not appear for people who see themselves as victims of circumstance. The third movement is expansion. Expansion is the refusal to settle, the willingness to keep growing, the understanding that your vessel can always stretch 1 degree more. Jewish teachings insist that the soul's natural state is movement, forward, upward, outward. When you align with expansion, you align with the very rhythm of creation. You tell life, "I can hold more," and life responds by giving you more to hold. These 3 movements merge into a single identity-shaping sentence, the same sentence my great-uncle spoke long before it became true, the sentence I ignored for years until I finally understood its power. Thank God, I am working and growing. It contains gratitude, responsibility, and expansion in one breath. It reprograms your sense of self. It tells your mind what to look for, your heart what to expect, and your life what to prepare for. To anchor this transformation, create a ritual. Choose a time, 9 in the morning works well, and repeat the sentence aloud. Not mechanically, but consciously. Feel it settle into your chest. Feel it expand your inner vessel. Feel it signal your readiness. Because once you begin speaking from this identity, you join countless others who discovered that prosperity does not begin with money. It begins with the person you become. And their stories prove what happens next. The power of this identity shift becomes undeniable when you witness it unfold in real lives. Ordinary people who change nothing in their circumstances at first, yet everything in their outcomes. Not because they suddenly earned more or found shortcuts or stumbled into luck, but because they began speaking and thinking from a different identity. Their external world adjusted to match their internal truth. Jewish wisdom has always taught that transformation begins in the unseen before it manifests in the visible. And the stories of those who embrace this principle reveal just how quickly life responds when identity aligns with abundance. Take the story of a bakery owner I once met, a man named Daniel. For years, he struggled to keep a shop open. Every morning, he muttered the same phrase under his breath, "Business is slow, but what can I do?" With each repetition, he shrank his possibility. When he learned the 3-part formula, something clicked. For the first time, he stopped describing his reality and started declaring his direction. Thank God I am working and growing. He said it before dawn. He said it while kneading dough. He said it even when no customers walked in. Within a month, he noticed ideas coming to him, simple improvements he had never considered. Within 2 months, foot traffic increased. Within 6 months, his bakery expanded. Nothing miraculous happened. Alignment happened. Then there was Elena, a retired teacher who felt invisible in her own life. She had survived many hardships, and survival had become her identity. She often said, "I'm used to having just enough." When she adopted the identity shift, her world softened. She began painting again, something she hadn't touched in 20 years. She started selling her artwork online, more as a gesture of courage than a business plan. But within a year, her art became her primary income. She didn't get younger, she didn't get luckier. She simply started speaking as a person who grows. And there was Malik, a college student drowning in anxiety, convinced that people like him didn't succeed financially. He repeated limiting sentences he had inherited from his family. When he learned the formula, he began a new ritual. Every night before bed, he whispered, "Thank God I am working and growing." It shifted the way he studied, the way he applied for jobs, the way he carried himself in interviews. Within months, he landed an internship that became a full-time position. His life didn't change by force, it changed by identity. What all these stories share is not genius, privilege, or luck. It is alignment. They prove that your background does not limit you. Your story does not trap you. Your age does not disqualify you. Jewish wisdom is not exclusive, it is universal. Anyone who aligns their identity with growth begins to attract opportunities that reflect that growth. And once you understand these stories, you're ready for the deeper truth, the spiritual architecture that explains why alignment works every single time. When you finally grasp the pattern behind these transformations, something profound settles in. Prosperity is not random, it is structured. It follows laws, spiritual, psychological, and deeply human, that have been preserved for generations within Jewish tradition. And at the center of those laws is a simple truth. Words create identity, identity creates action, and action creates opportunity. This is not metaphor, it is mechanics. It is the architecture through which abundance flows. Jewish wisdom roots this principle in the very beginning of existence. Creation did not begin with movement or matter. It began with speech. God said, "Let there be light," and there was light. The universe responded to a declaration, not a gesture. This moment established a cosmic template. Reality follows language. Humans, made in that same divine image, mirror this process in their own lives. We speak, and slowly, life rearranges itself around what we've spoken. Not magically, mechanically. Words shape attention. Attention shapes action. Action shapes results. But this isn't where the teaching stops. The deeper layer is this. Identity is a daily choice, not a fixed label. Every morning you decide, through your speech, which version of yourself you are committed to being. You either speak from stagnation, "I'm always behind, life is hard for me, I'm not meant for more," or you speak from expansion. "Thank God, I am working and growing." One identity shrinks your vessel, the other widens it. And prosperity can only enter where the vessel has room to receive. This is why two people with the same skills can live drastically different financial lives. One speaks as a victim and attracts obstacles. The other speaks as a builder and attracts solutions. One says, "I can't afford it," and their mind shuts down. The other says, "How can I create the means?" and their mind opens. Jewish wisdom teaches that the world responds not to need, but to readiness. And readiness is always spoken before it is lived. To help you test this for yourself, I offer a simple challenge. 7 days, nothing more. For 7 consecutive mornings, speak the identity-shaping formula. Thank God I am working and growing. Say it even if you don't fully believe it yet. Say it especially if you don't. Let the sentence settle into your breath. Let it push against the edges of who you thought you were. Let it quiet the voice of scarcity and awaken the part of you that still believes in expansion. During these 7 days, pay attention to small shifts, a new idea, a burst of motivation, a conversation that opens a door, a spark of clarity. These subtle movements are not coincidences. They are confirmations. They signal that your identity is adjusting and life is adjusting with it. And as this internal shift strengthens, you will sense that all the wisdom, all the stories, all the principles we've explored are guiding you toward one final insight, a closing truth meant not just to inspire you, but to seal this transformation into your daily life. As we arrive at the final movement of this journey, everything you've learned begins to gather into a single, steady truth. Your financial life is shaped not by luck, nor by complexity, nor by the chaos of circumstances, but by the identity you claim with your words each day. For 30 years, I chased strategies, techniques, and shortcuts, believing prosperity was somewhere outside myself. But every road led me back to the same doorway, the one that opens only when speech, intention, and identity align. What you say becomes what you seek. What you seek becomes what you notice. What you notice becomes what you act upon. And what you act upon becomes the life you live. Jewish wisdom compresses this entire chain of transformation into one ancient principle. The tongue is the pen of the soul. It writes the script your life is compelled to follow. And now you hold the pen with full awareness. So let us anchor everything with the core message that has echoed through each chapter. I'm fine when fine means small. Do not say it's enough when enough means stagnant. Speak as someone expanding. Let your identity rise to meet the future you desire, not the past you've endured. The formula you've learned, "Thank God I am working and growing," is not merely a sentence. It is a spiritual alignment, a psychological recalibration, and a declaration of readiness. Speak it when you wake. Speak it when doubt appears. Speak it when your old identity tries to pull you back into shrinking, settling, or playing small. Each repetition stretches your inner vessel a little wider, preparing you for opportunities that once passed you by. And now, before we close, I want to offer you the blessing that generations before you have whispered into their lives, a blessing meant to protect, to guide, and to illuminate your path. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May He shine His light upon you and grant you peace. Allow these words to rest on you like a gentle covering, a reminder that you are not walking this journey alone. Finally, remember that wisdom fulfills its purpose only when shared. You are not the endpoint of this teaching, you are its messenger. So I invite you to pass this video on to 3 people who need it. 3 souls who may be trapped in scarcity speech, shrinking identities, or silent resignation. Let this knowledge become a gift that travels from you to them, widening the circle of growth. Your next chapter begins now. With every sentence you speak, you choose who you are becoming. Choose growth, choose expansion, choose to rise. And let your life reflect the truth you now carry. Thank God I am working and growing.